people would say to me, why should we listen to you? You're not a doctor, you're not an expert.
If it's a discussion, we instantly think that it's actually about confrontation, but it's not.
It's almost like a God complex. They cannot conceive of the fact that they could be wrong.
But it's not until you are sitting with incredible discomfort and you're prepared to explore, what does that actually mean? What is happening for me?
I don't understand how you can be so excited about what's coming, Laura, because the world's looking like a mess. Yeah, but it has to look like a mess in order for people to wake up.
This is Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. I'm Kathy DeMarcos. Let's explore what it means to lead, live, and listen with intention.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Pay Attention. Now let me tell you, today's guest is actually somebody that you're going to adore. You know when you meet somebody and you instantly know that this is somebody that you want to connect with? Well, this is what you're going to see and feel with Laura Anderson. So let me give you a little bit of a understanding of who she is. Maybe you'll actually begin to understand who she genuinely is becoming and what she actually wants for the world. So Laura is a fearless freelance spokesperson, a lobbyist, and a connector working towards an awakened world. Her earlier career spanned the arts as an actress, a singer, and movement practitioner before she moved into international advocacy and public engagement. Since 2020, Laura has been deeply involved in health advocacy, working with the Channel Island Integrative Health Alliance and the World Council for Health, inspiring the Global Better Way conference series. Now based in Tuscany, Laura works globally to amplify conscious leadership, health sovereignty, and public awareness through conferences, podcasts, and international collaboration. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Kathy.
Well, as you can possibly hear, you may think that she's still in Tuscany, but today she's actually coming from Bali because you can hear the roosters in the background, right?
There's all sorts of things going on. I've got a lot of noise pollution, but it's all good. Nice, good frequency noise pollution I've got going on today. So yeah, you'll have to forgive the cockerels. There's not much I can do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, especially because you're on a break and I'm taking you away from family. So, Laura, this conversation is really, about something that both you and I have discovered, are very passionate about. So when we're talking about what we actually see is unveiling itself across the world, it is about bringing that level of awareness. Please share with me and all of those that are actually listening, where is it that you have actually discovered that there is just so much more within the world, within this universe, than perhaps what first meets the eye?
Oh, we'll start with a large question, shall we? It's not just a discovery. It's always been something that I've known, something deep, deep inside me, because I feel it. And I also realize that we're just a mirror of everything else that's going on. So, micro or macro, or however you want to look at this. Human beings are conscious power. And we've been reduced to something that we're not. We've been given an inversion, if you like, of our true nature, to the point where we're all flailing around, feeling like we are having to protect ourselves from other human beings, whereas actually we're all part of a collective humanity, and we're all coming and should be coming from a place of pure love, because that's what we really want to give out to people in our natural state. That's how, when we're born, that's how we are. We get dropped in as this place of pure love. You can see it in a baby's eyes when you look at a baby. So what happens to us? We become programmed. We get thrown into educational establishments. If we're bright, we then get sent off to really good universities, and then we get more and more and more and more infiltration of external information, and we become captured by intellectualism and by what I call labelism, where we're focusing on that aspect of our being so much that we are entrained or trapped into not focusing on the conscious intuitive, critical thinking aspect of who we are. And if I have an advocacy, if I have a mission, because I find it more and more difficult to define myself now. When people say, well, Laura, what'd you do?
Yeah.
I'll tell you. If my mission is anything, it's to get people to reconnect with that aspect of their being. And actually, you know, and I look at it from my previous life as a body worker, as a performer, as a singer, as a, you know, somebody who uses their voice a lot. It all comes down to your breath. I mean, it comes down to very, very simple principles. And I think once people understand that, once they realize that they're actually going through their day and they are hardly breathing, they're up here, you know, and you've shut down everything from a physical perspective, but it's not just a physical perspective, because then it shuts down literally your entire creative potentiality. We are pure potentiality, and it's about opening people back up to that possibility.
You know, you raise so many things that I could go into so many different, you know, points of discussion. But I think one of the things that we seldom think about or talk about or be curious around is that aspect of, you know, we actually think, and it's our brain that actually does everything. But you touched on something that, for me particularly, you know, in my more recent understanding, is the nervous system, you know, and so that breath that you talk about is also really important from understanding how our nervous system works. And it's not top down from the brain into our nervous system. You know, 4/5 of the time, it's our nervous system that actually tells our brain what's going on, and we have switched that off. And so that level of consciousness that you talk about, it's intuitive.
Is there not something about statistically there's 4,000 times more information coming up from our heart base to the brain than the other way?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, when people start to grasp hold of these concepts, a lot starts to change within the being, because they perceive things differently. And I've realized that with people. They're very visual. Once they can capture a picture of what's happening and direction and position, so heart to brain, or, you know, whatever that might be, it clicks. Things can click. And then there's the very significant, and this is my gift of being in Bali right now, slowing down. You know, speaking as someone who's always gone at 120 miles an hour, my son who's just arrived is like, Mom, just, I still have to be reminded, because I'm just that energy. And that's good also, because it allows me to be someone who can run events and do all sorts of very highly intense things. But slowing down is our critical go-to the point where you realize that it's almost like you're moving in slow motion. And as soon as you give yourself that pace, as soon as you allow yourself that slowing down of your breath, which is your creative process. So you're understanding that you're breathing in, and it's almost like you're holding that inhale. And as you breathe out, that's when your creativity, that's when your conscious flow goes. That's where you go next in your direction, in your energy, in your focus. So slowing down allows everything to start to flow into you in the right way, because you're coming at it from a conscious perspective, as opposed to just a driving yourself through the day perspective, which you get to the end of and you go, crikey, I'm absolutely wrecked now.
Yeah.
You know? And I noticed when I am in my flow, I can keep going. You know, I was on a Zoom call at 2 a.m. the other day. I was like, what am I doing on a Zoom call at 2 a.m? And I'm not really even particularly tired. What's happened? And now that's the difference that I can define. I've enabled myself to slow down, and it's good. It feels beautiful.
I often say to people, and, you know, you're using the word slow down, and I think that has a really different interpretation, I think, particularly to the Western world. Slowing down, you know, often means take a holiday, but a holiday doesn't actually allow you to slow down, right? But slowing down to breathe, to pause, right? That's actually critical. You know, as you know, I run retreats in Bali, but the one thing that I say to people, slowing down actually means that you have that ability to elevate. And that elevation is actually the level of consciousness. It's almost like you can actually lift yourself and you genuinely can have a helicopter view, and the actual breadth of what you can see things is very, very different to you actually slowing down on holiday because you're not on, in the office and you're not working. You're still going 50 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour in your case, right?
Yeah. But I think it's that reference point, isn't it? Once you understand what it feels like to have that beautiful flow where actually you become much more productive. And that's the key. Because you've slowed yourself down enough to actually process correctly in the right order. You don't have all that sort of chattery monkey energy that is a distraction to us. We've been so programmed into that. And it's got to the point where your brain is throwing all these spoons at you, going, oh, but Laura, have you thought about that? And, what's happening? And, what about breakfast? And, all these other, it's like unnecessary stuff that's coming in at you all the time. Like, it's like a tsunami. So I always use visuals or analogies. So I was walking the other day and it's been really wild here. We've had some big winds. The ocean is huge. So good news for surfers, but there's no way I'm going into that water. It's turbulent. Yeah. So I was standing on the shoreline with just inside the water up to my knees, and I could feel the power. When you're standing on the sand and it's like literally pulling underneath your feet, it's that sort of power.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, this is an incredible energy that's coming from this ocean. And you realize that you are you're placing yourself in the sand where you can control being. Yet, only a few meters away, maybe 10 meters away, the ocean is crashing at you. These huge waves are coming at you. If you were to stand in those waves, you'd be in deep trouble. But I knew that I was secure where I was standing. And that was a beautiful observation. I knew that I could feel the energy of this ocean, but I wasn't going to engage with that. I wasn't going to engage with the fear of being in that wildness and turbulence and danger of that wave. But I could watch it, I could honor what it was, I could be informed as to what it was. But then as it came towards me and as that water broke, it became this beautiful flow wrapping around my legs. And I was like,
yeah.
It's where we focus that's the important thing. But we're not doing it from a place of misinformation or lack of information. We are using our intuition and we're balancing. And that's a message that I'm trying to bring out to people now. Empowerment comes from information, but sitting at it from a place of neutrality. So you're not reacting, you're responding. And that's a very, very different energy.
Oh, on so many levels. And maybe we can actually just touch on something that, you're actually working on at the moment and have been on for a little bit of time. I think curiosity is perhaps what you actually have explored, and that is particularly in the health system. So health sovereignty is something that you're actually passionate about. It is something that I actually tend to focus as I look at personal sovereignty. Your level of curiosity around, our choices or our ability to choose, within the health system, whether it actually be in, anywhere where you are actually living or on a global basis, has actually become a focal point. Can we actually touch on that from a conscious level?
Yeah. So very early on in the pandemic, I felt there was something very off with the narrative. And I came at it from the perspective of my gift of critical thinking, in that I couldn't understand why we were only being told one narrative, to the point where anybody else who said anything different was smacked as misinformation, anti-vax, or whatever you wanted to call it. I call it labelism for a reason. People have become so fixated on terminology that's given to them from external forces, i.e. governments or media or whatever it might be, to the point that if anybody said anything that was out with that narrative, they were labeled with something that meant that people simply wouldn't listen to another word that they said, literally. Now, for me, that was enough. I went, hold on a minute. Who are they stamping with these labels and why? And then I realized that they were putting these labels upon people who had previously been, in the previous months, world leaders, world researchers, world medical specialists, people involved in actually the creation of RNA technology who were going, hello, hold on, this isn't ready for human use. And that was enough. For me, I then started looking to join the dots, and the dots that I joined became so close together, I don't even align between them. And so when people would say to me, Laura, why should we listen to you? Why should, you're putting on all these conferences. I put on 3 conferences during the pandemic called the COVID Conversations, where I enabled these people to get platforms. And by the way, we were branded as Misinformation Central, banned from events, banned from venues. But what was so fascinating was that the reverse happened. People were like, why have you been banned? We're going to come and listen to what you're saying. So we were standing room only in our events. We had hundreds of people turning up to these events. It was an incredible moment in a history of a place that we had never been to before, in our living memory, in our grandparents' living memory, probably, certainly several generations. We haven't had this level of shutdown.
Yeah.
So people would say to me, why should we listen to you? You're not a doctor. You're not an expert. And I was like, no. Frankly, apart from the very revered medical people that I follow and I'm very connected with, I'm quite glad. And the reason I say that is kind of what I alluded to right at the beginning of this, where I said, you think about the brightest people, the brightest children. They get the straight A's, they go into the universities, they get stuck into this information feed, they get told what the science is, they get told what the history is. They get to the point where their brain is so full of knowing and knowledge that it's almost like a God complex. They cannot conceive of the fact that they could be wrong. And on some levels, of course, they are quite brilliant. Yes, they are. But they're missing the key. And the key to all of it is critical thinking. And that's what we need to bring back in. And here's the thing. And the simple reality is the truth is not just coming out, it is tumbling out. The data is out, the information is out on the dangers of the COVID vaccines, the dangers of other medical things, not just the COVID vaccines. Many drugs, many platforms of medical intervention are now being questioned because they are being enabled to be discussed. And by the way, if you look at the definition of science, that's what it is. Science is debate. Science is all these brilliant people coming together and probably all fighting with one another, arguing different hypotheses, different concepts of where they come to, and then coming to some level of agreement or not. That's what science is. So this whole concept of trust the science, which was the label of the moment, or, what you heard across every news platform, was complete nonsense. So it was that. And by the way, the other reason that I followed it and I realized that there was something profound going on is I realized that often they were losing their careers, their jobs, their friends, their families, and in some cases, their lives. So why would they do that? Did anybody ask this question? Why were these people, they're not just ordinary doctors, these were eminent people putting themselves in danger. Some of them have to have bodyguards following them around all day now. Why? Because this is bigger than the individual. This is bigger than one person speaking out. This is about people waking up. And once they wake up, once they start to embrace other levels of information and join their own dots, and that's what this is all about. I'm not going to tell anybody what to think, but I'm going to provide them with lots of information. Once you understand how to hold on to your own health sovereignty, once you understand that it comes from inside of you and you have the power to do that. And the power comes from stepping away from being under the doctor, under the system. And once you get that, it's an incredibly extraordinary moment, because that's when you start healing. From that moment, small steps, you're not going to achieve anything in a day, but it's a very important feeling to go with and a drive to go with.
Yeah. So, if I actually take that out of just the health system, what you've actually done is brought back curiosity, the ability to think critically, to ask questions, as opposed to stay on the hamster wheel and just accept. And this is, I think, also quite interesting when I look at the bigger picture. The narrative that everything is actually created from is genuinely the really quick, let me just scan through things. And if I see it often enough, it's fact.
That's right.
And so, if you think about how our actual, media platforms particularly played such a huge role, it's interesting, what comes up constantly is what you have actually perhaps, paused for 3 seconds to look at, then becomes part of your feed. But nobody stops to think about that. And so I think one of the things I go back to you actually saying, to pause, to slow down. We have forgotten how to do that because we are playing the chase game. But we don't often stop in that chase game to actually genuinely say, but how does this feel for me? Because again, we've gone back into our, into our brains that actually defaults into what we have been taught.
Yeah. And here's the piece, Kathy. I feel that sometimes you have to get into a very uncomfortable place. Sometimes you have to not feel good. You need to go through some level of, whether it's physical or mental journey, in order to start questioning it. Because when you're able to just patch it, it's like a big sticking plaster, isn't it? You put another plaster on. Okay, well, this feels a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay because I'm going to go over here and have a drink with my friends, or it'll all go away. But what's happening, and that's why I was saying truth, you can't hide it. It's coming out, and you cannot disengage from it anymore because it's becoming more and more and more uncomfortable to do it. It's a physical, visceral thing now.
When I actually look back at some of the discussions that were being had, of course, the narrative was one lens. And it was being drummed. And I don't want to just focus on health and particularly COVID, but this is actually a signal for all of us to pay attention to when we only hear one narrative, when we are continuously given that and there is no other alternative. What actually prevents us from actually stopping and asking the questions, hang on a minute, what else is missing? What else is possible? And this is the one thing, no matter what industry we actually talk about, be it education, be it health, be it economic security, fiscal policy, we need to be asking the questions. And I think you're actually presenting the uncomfortable bit is the part that I think as humans, we have actually really avoided that. For some reason, if it's a discussion, we instantly think that it's actually about confrontation, but it's not. Being uncomfortable is putting yourself in that place. Just have a discussion.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think if you were to draw a common link between a lot of the more awake, conscious people, they've often been already through their journey. They've had to deal with something, which is why it's shaken them. So I'm someone who remains, maybe some people go, I don't understand how you can be so positive. I don't understand how you can be so excited about what's coming, Nora, because the world's looking like a mess. Like, yeah, but it has to look like a mess in order for people to wake up. The pandemic, and this is going to sound very strange, was a gift for many people. It was a gift. It shunted people into a whole new level of, hold on a minute, maybe everything that I've believed, everything that I've been living with, everything that I've got my career, I've got my job, I've got my mortgage, I've got my family, and why do I still feel so decalibrated or anxious? We're living in this prism of vibration that doesn't fit what we actually are. So I see it as a gift, and I see this moment and this conversation as one of great hope. And so this next event that we're putting on in Guernsey, which is a tiny island, right? But it's got all of these world shifters coming in. Peter McCulloch and John Leake and Del Bigtree and Neil Oliver and Tess Laurie. I mean, it's an extraordinary moment. You've got doctors like William Macus, who talks about repurposed drugs for cancer protocols, cancer treatment. Angus Dalgleish, oncologist. I mean, these people are literally creating a whole new paradigm in health. And I go back to the health because that's kind of where my focus has been. However, this is becoming, as you say, much bigger. It's on every platform. It's our news. It's our politics. It's our financial system. It's literally a new paradigm that we need to create. So I have unbelievable hope and optimism for the future because it's going to be based on the fact that people realize there has to be a change. And that has already seeded itself in most people's hearts. They just need honor and acknowledge the fact that that's what's happened.
Yeah. Do you know, I think over the last 12 to 18 months, the one thing that I have heard repeatedly is that I have everything, and the reality is that I shouldn't really be complaining, but it just feels like there's something else.
Exactly.
And that something else is where I think you and I both come from, in that explore it. Don't just actually allow it to lay dormant. This is the opportunity for you to actually raise that level of consciousness and sit with that feeling of unknown, to actually make a choice. What do you want to do differently? Whether it be to ask more questions, whether it to be to turn up to somewhere where you thought you would never turn up. But that then actually, gives you the opportunity to meet different people, to support different people,
Exactly.
to ask different questions, right?
Yeah. And you've put your finger on it there with the support different people. Real joy in human existence comes from when we feel we are making a difference to others. It's not a me thing. And that's another inversion that we've been built into our society. That is, right. Well, as long as I'm all right, I'm going to make lots of money. Maybe I'll get some plastic surgery. Maybe I'll get a better car. Maybe I'll go on a holiday. So it's all external. It's externalism, if you want an ism involved in that. That's what's happened. But it's not how we should be. It's not an external fix. This is an internal fix. And once we start to do that, and we can do it in very small ways, just by stepping out and helping someone, we all know how that feels. When we go and help the neighbor or the elderly lady, we have a chat, or even just smiling at them,
Yeah.
And I've really honored that. People say, Laura, you got a big smile. It's just what I do, because I know that I can really give someone a lift. What is it they say? A smile can travel around the world. It truly can, because you can shift someone in that very act. It's so beautiful. This is the thing. This is so beautifully simple.
Nothing needs to be complicated. I think, yet again, that's something that, we've actually been taught. The system has almost actually made us believe that if it's too easy, then it's not right. Well, actually, it's the total opposite.
Yes.
Everything is actually, easy.
Mm-hmm.
It's us that actually complicate things.
Yes, completely. And, I'm speaking as a mother of 3 boys. So my boys are now 20, 22, and 25. And I think it's an interesting thing. It's almost like a generational difference between those ages. So my 25-year-old is, he's studying medicine, wants to become a surgeon. So he's in the system. He's working so hard, you can imagine, it's a full-on stress, but he's devoted, and actually he's got great vision for the future. So I applaud that, because he has a purpose. Oh, that's another big one, purpose. The middle one, he's out traveling and he works as a deckhand and on these big super yachts. So he gets exposed to all sorts of very interesting dynamics and different sorts of people and beautiful places, but he's journeying, he's traveling the world. My youngest one, he's a model and he travels all over the world. I consciously, and they're all very clever, they could all have gone to university, could all have gone that way, and maybe they will. But I consciously, as a mother, encouraged all of them to just go off and experience life and see the world and get to know different cultures and different people, because that is like the university that you really need. Oh, here's an example, right? I was sitting on a train. I was in Oxford. It's where my son has been studying. And I was sitting opposite a young woman who's obviously a student and her mother. And she was reading through her literature books, English literature student. undergraduate. And she was very agitated, and she kept picking up her pen and scribbling on the paper and then looking at her mum, and her mum was sort of busy reading something. And she just, out of the blue, she said to her mum, "Mum, if I chose to drop out of university, what would you do?" And quick as a flash, the mother said, "I'd kick you out of house."
Oh, wow.
And I almost wanted to reach over and adopt her. I was like, okay, I'm really sorry. That's just not good. But it was a real smack in the head to me of how a lot of people, where they've got to. They've got this beautiful young person that they've created that's got all the potentiality, and they feel that they have to achieve a degree, the best job, the best marriage, the best whatever it is that she has in her mind is for the best of her daughter. But you can see in the physical behavior of this young woman, that she doesn't feel comfortable with any of that.
Yeah.
And that's where we've got to. Society expects you to have the answer for your whole life in your hand by the time you leave school. What subject are you going to study? What career what are you going to do? How can you possibly know? And I know some extremely successful people who've gone into the very, very top of banking and law or whatever it is. And on paper, they would look like, wow, these people they've made it.
They've succeeded.
But they haven't.
It's interesting. I think that's one thing. It doesn't matter what generation, we're actually talking about having the perception that you need to actually have fulfilled life through the success of, a degree, a title, a position that you hold is quite fascinating to me. I think I actually had a similar story. I remember my son many years ago, and I think it may have been in his second or third year of university. His undergraduate degree was actually aeronautical engineering. And he came home one day and he said, "I'm not sure that I'm cut out for this." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "I don't have a photogenic memory." And I said, "Okay, that's good. It means that you're actually absorbing and living life, not just rote learning and remembering things." And I said to him, "Why do you think you need to?" And he said, "Because everybody else does." And I said, "Well, you're going to be the one that actually, whether you choose to finish or not, be the one that experiences living life. But you know what? You can drop out. Why don't you go and surf the world? Outdoors, different country, girls, sun." And he looked at me and he said, "Have you lost the plot?"
No.
And I said, no.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we do have attachments. But when do we stop to think about what is that attachment about? Because to go back to your earlier point, externalism.
Yeah, exactly. It is. And here's the thing. If you are really driven towards learning something and following a particular career path or whatever, then of course you're going to do that anyway. But maybe you'll come at it from an informed place of knowing yourself a little bit more and knowing the world a little bit more, rather than this driven place of feeling that you should be. It shouldn't be external. This needs to be more of a journey, an internal journey. And, I would strive to encourage any young parent or young person to really, really listen to what I've got to say. I went to St Andrews. I got my master's in this, that, and the next. And did I ever really use it? No, not really. Did I have a great time? I did. I did have a great time. And it enabled me to formulate and conceive and write good, papers and all that sort of thing. Yes, it did. So it had its place. But did I need it for anything that I've actually done in my life? Not really. I am what I am. And we're all different. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Each and every one of us is unique. And how can you pigeonhole us? How can you put us all into the same box and give us the same formula? It's just not possible.
I often say to people, understand where you're actually sitting with the thought that you've actually just shared. Is it yours? Yeah. Or has it actually come from something that has actually told you that that's the story or the narrative that you actually need to believe in. And that's a hard place to actually sit, because not many of us genuinely take that time to really understand, where did that even come from?
It's a really valid point. And you go back to that whole journalism bit. Exactly. The regurgitation that you hear in people on their political stance or whatever it might be, a lot of it is just verbatim what they've had fed to them over the television or the radio. This is an interesting statement. I haven't watched television in terms of mainstream TV now for at least 15 years. But does that make me an uninformed person? No. Because I'll still listen to news feeds from these places, but I'll also listen to other news feeds. But what I'm not is I'm not dictated to by a particular drip feed of narrative. And what I noticed was, because I used to watch the BBC as a good British citizen, I'd sit there and watch the 10 o'clock news, and I'd realised that my heart, by the time I was going to sleep, my heart was racing. I was like, well, what am I doing? Why am I doing that?
Yeah, interesting.
But it was because my father had done that, and, probably his father had done that. Don't do it. Stop it. And it made a huge difference to me,
It's interesting. I think there are so many things that we just do by habit. We wouldn't even recognize that they are a habit. I think, one of the most profound times in my life was 11 years ago, sitting in the middle of Gorogoro in Angelan with the Maasai, and just having that incredible realization of, oh my gosh, I am so privileged. And how could I have not have been aware of my own biases? I thought that I actually had free will and that I, had an enormous amount of lived experience. But it's not until you are sitting with incredible discomfort and you're prepared to explore, what does that actually mean? What is happening, for me, to then actually sit with, what do I now want to do with that?
It's a big one, isn't it? And the other thing I've noticed, and I see it, particularly the older Balinese people here are still so connected to their nature and to their origins. Oh my gosh. We think we've got it all. As a Western people, we think we've mastered it. And completely the opposite is true. They don't lack anything. They don't want anything. They are so at peace. And it's a very, very beautiful thing to see that. And I'm sure you see it in the Maasai. They've never lost connection with source, however you want to define that. The Native Americans would be the same energy. There's something so powerful that we need to retrieve and start to really see these people as the wisdom keepers that they are.
Yeah. Yes, I think one of the things that I've always been fascinated with is the ancient wisdom. So, be it Indigenous from any culture, we have Indigenous that have a wealth of knowledge here in Australia, the Indian culture, the Ayurveda practices, the Chinese medicine. I think in my exploration, across the world, I've always been one to want to live with the locals to better understand. And, Bali is actually like that for me too. The incredible amount of wisdom that actually sits within them that hasn't come from a degree, but has actually come from generations of sitting within tribe and community, something that we no longer do, is just so important. But I think we're beginning to remember that. And, just like we're having a conversation now, they're the types of conversations that we are bringing together right across the world as a collective. And for me, that's actually raising consciousness. How do you feel about that?
I agree. It's honouring wisdom. It's honouring wisdom in, as you say, these ancient people. It's honouring wisdom in our own elderly. Rather than seeing them just as an old person who you put in a home and you stick them in front of a television. spend some time with them. Listen to them.
Yeah.
There's a depth that only comes with age. And it's because it's lived experience. And the other thing that I notice here with Bali, and it makes me feel so joyful that there are still people who live like this in community. You know, they talk about the traditional family homes and how they have like little houses, little huts, one for the grandparents, another one for the younger children. And then they have their temple, then they have their communal kitchen. I mean, it's, you know, and all of the new age people are going, all right, what we need to do is we need to live in community. Hello. You know, this was the way it was always was supposed to be. It's not a new concept. But there is a kind of a need. There is a feeling, and that's a magnificent thing. I'm not dishing the new age for wanting to do that. I get that. You know, I moved to Tuscany, to a very rural area, to live amongst like-minded people where we're still able to live and eat organically, grow your own things. The Italians have never lost that. They have their olives, they have their wine, you know, they still grow their vegetables in their front gardens. This is simple, sensible, conscious way of living. This is conscious, sustainable living. And we need to return back to this as a paradigm and away from the convenience of having blueberries in your life every day or avocados in your life every day or just going off to a coffee takeaway and getting a muffin. And I mean, all these things are lovely. Don't get me wrong. You know, I love my latte, but the point is I don't have to have it. And I would rather sacrifice the convenience and the speed that modern society has provided with us for integrity. And we need to start respecting that in our old people, in our land, in our farmers. You know, I was moved deeply yesterday. I saw a bit of video footage in France. The farmers there are just being absolutely destroyed. They're being just annihilated, you know, and there are, some of them are committing suicide. I mean, it's the most horrific story if you start to look into it. But anyway, there's been a big barricade and they've been throwing cow manure all over the motorway, the péage. And there's hundreds of them. The camera spans and then you see all of the police with their armed, you know, they've got their riot gear on and whatever. And the farmers are standing there and the one standing at the front he's very peacefully just shouting out his truth. He's telling them, you know, please, we don't want to fight. This is what's happening to us. Do you understand? And then they all drop down on their knee and they sing the Marseillaise. All of them. Now that's what real power looks like.
Yeah.
It's not fighting. It's integrity and it's honesty and it's showing people that they are human too. That's it.
You know, I think one of the things that I've actually really focused on, particularly this year, is that it's time for the quiet, gentle voice to actually be heard. For too long, it's been the voice of power, the loudest voice, the voice that actually makes us, you know, just cringe and just go, I don't want to actually engage because it's going to be a fight. It doesn't need to be a fight. And in actual fact, it is the gentle voice that will actually rise, particularly coming into the new era of consciousness. And I think this is where our actual gatherings of voices that have actually just simply done what needed to be done behind the scenes to now actually collectively come together. And that's what you're actually doing, you know, in February next year. It is something that we'll actually see start shifting right across the globe next year. There are forums that will actually start rising. So, Laura, if I was to actually say to you, when you think about that and consciousness as a whole, what does it actually mean for you?
My heart pounds with the excitement of how you talk like that. It's like a seed. So what I did in Guernsey back in 2020, I had no idea whether it was going to be successful or not, whether anybody was going to turn up, whether they just go, oh, she's a bit nuts. Fair comment. But I planted a seed. And because it came from the right place, it grew. And so what's happening in February, and is, by the way, it's happening all over the world. There's a branch of the World Council for Health here in Indonesia. There's one in Sydney. They're all over the place. The seeds are starting to germinate. And because they're coming from a place of authenticity and consciousness, there's no other agenda.
Mm.
And that's the critical point. And that's why they will grow into something huge. Because as you know, and somebody was talking about the banyan tree to me yesterday. I've got this beautiful banyan, as I'm looking at beyond my computer, this beautiful banyan tree there. And they were explaining that one banyan tree creates all of the other banyan trees. They're all connected to one another. There's this huge microcosm. And of course, then you've got the mycelium and everything else that you could start looking at. That's what's happening. So never feel small. Never feel like you're just one little person. Because, if you looked at me standing next to certainly all my big sons, you go, oh, she's quite small, really. She is. But that's not the energy of the piece. It's what we bring to it. It's the energy that we bring. And once you get a collective of people who are all resonating with that, that's when things change. And I don't need to know what that's going to look like. I don't even need to understand it from an intellectual. I can't possibly know what it's going to look like, but I know that it will.
Intention is something that I talk about quite a lot. And it's not about whether something works or it doesn't work. It's actually the intention that you actually put, from the mere thought to the actual action that you take that makes the difference. And people, I don't think, have quite understood even your actual language. The second you make a choice about what words you use, that is with intentionality. And that is what people honestly receive, whether you're in a room, whether you're across, a platform on the other side of the world. That actual feeling is absorbed. You don't even have to say anything, Laura.
No.
You can enter a room and people will feel that intentionality. That, to me, is what is actually rising globally.
It's the magic of the moment. And, sound, frequency, vibration, that's all any of it is. If you speak a bad word, that has a vibration. People feel it, whether consciously or not. If you speak from a place of authenticity, whatever that looks like, people also feel that. So it's like the space between the words, which is actually the most significant thing that you can do. And that's the beauty of it. And that's quantum physics. That's not just me sitting here under my banyan tree. This is simple scientific fact. And once people start to really own that, that's when things change, personally and externally.
Yeah. It's interesting, you mentioned quantum physics, and I think people don't quite understand it, but when we look at it, quantum physics is actually, you see it here and then it appears here. And so like what you've just said, right? It is actually what happens in between. And that's actually, where we're actually sitting from a level of consciousness and the intention, that actually goes from here to here. That's what carries.
Yeah. It's the neutrality.
Yeah.
It's sitting in the middle point, isn't it? And you've got all of this swirling around you. But it's the ability to work, almost like sometimes I say, just see everything like it's a movie. Even if you feel like you're being pulled towards it or affected and vibrated by it, drop back. And that's your breath.
Yes.
It's so easy. Just 2 or 3 slowing down of the breath can shift your entire moment, and therefore your entire reality, because that's all it is.
You will appreciate this. I have for years actually said, I hear what's actually said between the words you choose to tell me. And people look at me and go, what?
She's right, though.
Right. You get it. Yes. Yes.
And the thing is, once you try it yourself, then you get that.
Yeah.
Because you're starting to feel things again. And that's what people need to do. They need to start allowing. Oh, the word allow, the word surrender. And that surrender is not a giving up. Surrender is simply just a, okay, just whatever, bring it on. I don't know what it is, but I am just going to allow myself to be in this place, even if it's deeply uncomfortable to me, you know? Because I've got news for people. Antidepressants don't work, you know? And I speak as someone who, as a body worker, would look at the medical enrollment forms of the people that would come in through my studio. I was absolutely devastated by the number of people who were being diagnosed antidepressants. Like, why are you on antidepressants? Oh, well, I've got a bad back. Well, have you? So why are you on antidepressants? Well, they said, well, clearly I wouldn't be sleeping, therefore I must be depressed. No. No, stop it.
Wow.
Stop masking your being, because that's all that they're doing. They're just masking you and making it more difficult for you to actually authentically feel how you are, because depression, just like joy, is a state of feeling. It's just a moment. It's not a definition of what you are. And this is another big one.
Yeah.
People need to step away from, oh, well, it's because I'm ADHD, or I'm a depressive, or I'm this, or I'm a that. No, you've got these parts, aspects of your being, but your being is multi-dimensional or multifactorial, however you want to describe that. And that you are shutting away if you are medicating yourself in whatever way. And then obviously in different people, they reach for different things. We know maybe it's they drink too much, maybe it's they're on antidepressant, whatever it might be that they use as an external to try to dumb them down from actually feeling. But I've got news for you. The only way to process something is to dive right through the middle of it, as uncomfortable as that might be. But that's what you need to step into. And that's the bit that people... So I have an analogy. I was traveling in India a few weeks ago, and we went to Amma's ashram in Kerala. And there they have an elephant. Now, this is a sacred elephant. It's called Lakshmi. It's very beautiful. But it broke my heart, because this elephant is in a cage. The cage isn't very big. And she's chained by an ankle. She's got a big chain on. But, they go, she's got 2 attendants who are there with her all the time. She's worshipped, basically. They put the beautiful marks, paint her differently every day, give her lots of food. And it struck me as I was watching her. She's got the power in her to break that chain and break the cage within a heartbeat. But she doesn't realize she's even in a cage. She doesn't realize she's got a chain around her leg. And her captors are very lovely. They're feeding her, they're blessing her. That's what people have got to. And don't even realize that they're in a cage. Yeah. They don't understand how powerful they are, that they could break out of that any time they choose to. And that's a very, very powerful visual, if you like, for where we are.
Yeah.
So it's your decision, and that's what I say to people. It's like, I'm handing you the baton. Nobody else can do this for you. I can't do this for you. You can't do this for them. We can share. We can give them platforms. We can do all of those things and support them. But actually, in the end, you have to own it yourself.
Yeah. Choice, right? Choice. And you do have it all within you. Yeah. Again, things that, I say over and over again, you and I actually come from the same place. So, Laura, we could actually talk forever, but we do need to wrap up. So if there was one thing that I actually ask you to think about, and that would be for everybody who's actually going to hear this episode, what's the one thing that you want them to take away?
Just that, to allow themselves to be present, to empower themselves with the realization of it's okay to feel in the uncomfortable, because that's when your healing starts.
Yeah.
That's where we are.
It's wonderful. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. So, for all of you that are actually listening to this episode, give yourself permission to explore, to feel, to sit in the uncomfortable and look within, because you do have the power. You do have the ability. Laura, as always, it's been such a joy. I'm going to catch up with you very soon anyway.
Absolutely.
But all the best for February. But we're going to have another conversation in January for people to actually hear a bit more about what you have to share, honour, and give them an opportunity to be curious about.
That's wonderful. I can't wait.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
This was Let's Pay Attention, Hacking Consciousness. Stay awake, lead with heart, be bold enough to listen deeply. I'm Kathy DeMarcos. Until next time, be the impact.